You know, this has been quite a journey for us over the past year, and we've walked through it. I mean, we're here today, but how was your walk through this time? In the mental health industry field, they say, you know, we experienced a collective trauma. And some folks separated from each other, some folks banded together. But today, we want to spend a little time asking questions about this topic because, you know, my series lately, the past few weeks, we've been talking about how can we get to a more balanced life, a more full life. We are here to experience life, experience it abundantly with our source at our core, with God. And we believe we have to be more balanced, and part of that is taking a look at our mental health. Being able to lean into this understanding of perhaps the collective trauma that's happened, because you've changed, whether you realize it or not, after what we have been through in the past year and a half. That's why I wanted to invite two special guests. I knew I wanted to have the folks from D2 Counseling to come in because I've had a chance to work with them professionally over the past few years. And I'm so excited to have them here today for us to do a dialogue today. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Dina Hijazi and Reverend Daniel Gowan. Come on up. Well, it's been a minute since you were sitting on these chairs with us when we got together to talk about the pandemic March of last year, of 2020. So a few things would have changed. Would you agree? I guess that's a rhetorical question. A lot has changed. But thank you for being here. I just want to give everybody here just a little bit of an idea, a little bit more about you and your credentials today. And Dr. Dina earned her bachelor's in psychology at a school called Purdue, and I believe they are the Boilermakers. Am I correct? Purdue Boilermakers? And I don't know what a Boilermaker, I never knew what that is, so you can explain that to me later. And your master's you received, I do know what the Fighting Irish is, of Notre Dame. And then you got your postdoctorate, your PhD at, let me just go like that, you know, Texas Longhorns, for those of you who don't know. And your postdoctorate education includes training, clinical training in family systems therapy, and you've recently had postdoctoral training in trauma and addiction. And you also hold a national certification in sex addiction therapy and also multiple addiction therapy. And you're trained in eye movement desensitization. It's a lot, it's a mouthful. Desensitization, say it.
Desensitization.
Yeah, good, thank you. Reprocessing, I just call it EMDR. It's much easier to say that. And Reverend Daniel, you began your counseling career in ministry, and you used the background to integrate spiritual principles into helping clients gain a deeper understanding of themselves and their partner and important people in their lives. And you have a Master of Arts in Counseling as well as a Master of Divinity. And you are credentialed as a licensed chemical dependency counselor, a licensed professional counselor supervisor, and you are also a certified sex addiction therapist, as well as being trained in MDR. And so one thing that impressed me about your long bios that I just touched on here is that your willingness to combine spirituality with psychology as licensed counselors. You realize the value of that. And at Unity, we believe, like I just said a while ago, that God is at our source, and that our spiritual well-being is certainly a platform for our emotional and general well-being. So I don't know, is there anything you would like to add to that, as far as that more of a holistic approach that you take? Is that what that is? Digging into my leg over here, the extra mic. There we go. Thank you, God, for letting us. I was just talking about you. Thank you.
I thought it was by design so there wouldn't be a competing preacher up here.
You know me too well. Now, guys, with these mics, you do have to hold them pretty close. Okay.
No, I agree with you. One of the leaders in our field, Dr. Young, said he had a sign over his door that said, "Bidden or unbidden, God is here." And I like that, in that it's a recognition that there are things and movements and power beyond us that are involved in us, and it's up to us to begin to recognize that. And for me, that's the foundation place that I came from, to look at the connection of spirituality and humanity and psychology.
And you will have to hold it just a little closer with these mics. Now, with the counseling and everything that you do, could you tell us quickly, what groups do you work with? Do you just work with individuals? Don't you also work with larger groups?
Yes, we do. And one of the things that we'll talk about today is our foundational belief that we are wired and built to be in connection with others. So as a result of that, we run a lot of therapy groups in our practice. I think we have 11 groups that meet weekly or every other week as an attempt to support the community in staying connected. And those groups have been, they're thriving right now. People really want to re-engage as we've had some of our restrictions lifted. But we continued consistently with Zoom meetings on group meetings, and then we moved to hybrid when people were willing to come in personally, and now we've gone almost exclusively to in-person because we really want to encourage people to be in the physical presence of each other like you all are here today.
And you work with corporations, you work with churches as well around conflict resolution. Is that true?
Yes, and within our practice, we handle all ages. We've got other therapists that focus and specialize on younger folks in the family. We approach it from a family system, so we're able to accommodate everyone in the family. But to your point, we also do speaking and then conflict resolution and consulting, both with churches and with corporations. A lot of times they squabble, and we're brought in to help them work through the emotional connections and the relationships that are even in business and in churches as well.
I think my experience has been in the world that it seems to be a social taboo to talk about mental health, or there isn't enough of appreciation for mental health. And especially these days, as we've experienced increased amount of loneliness, depression. Why do you think there is such a stigma around this issue? And I, even myself, I do spiritual counseling with folks and things, but when I hurt my shoulder a year and a half ago, rotator cuff surgery, it was easier to talk about that than it was to talk about the mental aspects of it, the emotional aspects of it. Why are we hardwired this way, or what? What do you think? What do you think about this stigma that there is? Where does it come from? Why is it that way in our society?
One of the things that I observe is there's this attitude of self-reliance that we are brought up with, and with that, I think there is a predisposition to try and deal with it ourselves. One of the comments I made to a client the other day, I said, we wouldn't go and do our own dental work, would we? And they backed off and they said no, and it was an invitation to begin to consider that we can go to other people with a skill set that help us move through that. None of us are nearly as bashful about medications, for example, when we see that the aspirin takes care of the blood pressure or the headache, but when we talk about other medications that deal with the brain, there's a hesitation there. But we don't look down on people who take insulin for diabetes, for example. Likewise, I do think that the mental health, the approach to mental health is changing and it's improving over time. There's some good awareness as people come out to talk about their own personal experiences, and I think that does help to alleviate the stigma that's been around this for quite some time.
I would just add that if you think about your own upbringings, you think about even how you raised your own children, the focus of our language in this country and really in the West in general is on what's out there, what can you do to make a difference out there. And it's sort of like we're in this developmental delay in this country in terms of being able to have good language around our internal universe, right? What is life like in here? And we don't have a lot of good language yet. And we compare that to the East, where there's a lot more focus on the insides. We're very much about the outsides of what can we control and change and dominate or shift. And so I think we're learning that is only a piece of the puzzle, and that another large piece is the internal. And that for us is where spirituality comes in, because you can't have a dialogue about your internal state unless you just talk about biology and neurology, right? Eventually you get to the point of there's something else that's beyond just what we see, hear, feel.
Yes, I want to touch on that. And also, if someone has chest pains, they're quick to call the cardiologist or go to the cardiologist. But what about an emotional heart attack or an emotional attack? People are less likely to talk to someone about it. And you mentioned the internal universe. You spoke to that beautifully. And most of us on our spiritual path, we know we need to go inward when a trauma happens, but I think as a collective humanity, I know for sure that some folks have been saying, where is God in this? How do you reconcile that for folks? Say, well, how could these such bad things be happening to good people? And not just with the pandemic, but generally speaking. And so you talked about that universe. So how do you bridge that for folks?
For me, there's a couple of areas I go. First is I have to Dina's point, I have to look at what is it that I'm expecting others to be different on. And the reality is that the basis of control that I have on how I choose to show up in this world and how I choose to show up in my relationship with you stops about right here. It's how I show up internally for myself first, and then how I choose to manage me in relationship with you. Now, it grows from there into a larger question of where is God in this, and theologically, one of the things I believe is that God gives us free will. And so as a result of that, one of the costs on that is that people end up bumping into each other. We end up having things that occur that we don't predict, nor do we necessarily have the ability to control when stuff happens out there. What I do have is the opportunity to decide how I'm going to show up in the face of that, and that's where I get to rely on my God. I get to step into my understanding of spirituality through prayer, through meditation, through connection with others, through my spiritual advisors, to be able to understand how I can show up in a different way, in one that keeps me in an authentic role, one that keeps me in a respectful role, and that way I can engage others from that place. But it is through prayer and the meditation and the connection with my higher power that I'm able to gain strength and I'm able to gain perspective to be careful about how I show up. I have little I have little control over how you show up, but I do get to show up in a way that I'm comfortable with, in a respectful way with others.
I think we need to have you here more often. Oh, what do you think that we've learned anything as a humanity? Or do you think we're going to repeat the same old cycles? We can be hard-headed, or at least I can be hard-headed. So what do you think we've learned?
Well, I've learned to stock up on toilet paper. And I think that's actually, there's something behind that where I'm not sure what's going on with other people.
And he says it with such a straight face. I never know if he knows he's funny or not. That's the thing. So.
Well, my point is that I don't think we're going to predict what other people are going to do. And when we don't have that prediction, again, I get to show up how I choose to. And one of the things that I think we've all been invited to look at is what has the impact been on me, on mine, my family, my business relationships. And we've had such a distancing happening, particularly when we had to stay at home, that I've had to reevaluate the relationships. And what has the impact of that been on me?
I would love to know what you all have learned. I have been talking to many people about this question. What are the lessons? What have we grown from this? And everybody's experience has been different. There have been people from the extreme that have, lost very close ones to COVID. We've also had people that know of people, but not in their inner circle. We also know, we know a lot of people that have had friends or family that have just become ill during the year, not with COVID, but have had to go in the hospital and had to deal with just being completely alone and cut off from loved ones at a time where they really, really need support and depend on support. And we know that humans do better with support. We actually heal better. So to have all of that removed, then the burden was shifted to the nurses and the caregivers and the healthcare providers. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing them really suffer as this begins to loosen a bit. So we've got that extreme. We also, in our practice, and again, we speak from our clients' experience, but we also speak from our friends because we're aware that people that come to us might be more on a moderate to severe level of pain when they engage in therapy. But we have people that are very introverted that have had a year of joy, that have said, I have loved this. I don't have to go to anything. I can do everything on Zoom. I don't even have to say hello to people. And that's a real genuine style. And it's, I think it's important that we don't make them wrong, but it's just a different personality. So we've had this huge spectrum of people and how their responses have been through this. And what I would say is I've gotten some major lessons, and probably the biggest one for me is that I had an unquestioned belief that the authority would support me, whatever I defined that was. And so when March hit and I turned to leaders for information, I quickly found out I couldn't rely on them. That moved me into an immediate existential or spiritual dilemma, because who can I rely on? So as I've experienced this with other people, I've heard a lot of people saying, where do you go for truth? Where do you go for safety? You said last week, where do you find safe harbor? I don't know if those were your words, but where do we go for this? And to me, we are being called to come back to self, to come back to our spiritual belief, to come back to the connection with something greater, and to trust that inner wisdom, that divine wisdom. So that's one of my biggest lessons.
In the mental health field, I hear often that we've certainly gone through an epidemic of chronic stress. and severe loneliness, and you spoke to a shared understanding of the trauma that there has been during COVID over the past year and a half. And also, I believe you mentioned something, maybe it was you, Reverend Daniel, about time warp, about the trauma cycle. Is there anything else you'd want to share on the impact of COVID?
Well, you made a joke at the beginning of the service today about, was that last week or was that 2 years ago? I think that's true for all of us, as I've lost track of time. I was talking to one of our clinicians, and I said, you've been here, what, two months? And they'd been there 10 months, but had been through COVID. And my time is, I've lost reference points on that, because every day sitting down to the computer at Zoom has created a repetition for me that apparently my touchstones that help me gauge time has been changed completely through this COVID process and through this withdrawal from my regular normal connections with society. So that's one of the things that's happened for me, and I find that it's not coming back as easily. I was joking with you when we were talking the other day. I had a client stand up at the end of the session and reached out to shake my hand, and I felt this anxiety come up within me because I wasn't sure if I was supposed to shake hands yet. Is it okay to hug? I mean, there's all these things that have come about that I've taken on as a new normal, but the normal is continually changing. And that's where I think it comes back to Dina's point, is if I wait for others to define how I'm supposed to show up, who is it that I'm handing the power to? And so my connection in my deep knowing, that we might call spirituality, is a better place to start than watching one of the news channels or listening for whatever authority is going to change the rules tomorrow. So it's a deeper level that I have to go to, and it's actually, I think, an invitation into a deeper level of consciousness of how I choose to show up with other people today.
Yeah, I never thought at Unity we would be going, thinking, doing a dance to hug or not to hug or not to hug. What are some steps? Because I guess, we wake up, we're understanding what's happened. As far as ways, practices to move forward, because I think some of us are feeling great to be out again, but it's kind of like, we can easily get back into a bit of fear or paralysis about, oh, what's next? Oh, what's the future hold? I don't know. So we at Unity like to have a mindfulness practice of being present in the moment. But how can we, what are some other potential ways to do that and to move forward?
So if we're really talking about, well, let me back up. One of the data points that we have is some good research on the long-term effects of SARS. So we're seeing that really is very similar to what we're experiencing now, where these long-term effects, are this what we call burnout, but to be more specific, it's this sense of being lost, low motivation, low energy, a lessening of optimism, a move toward this the doldrums, right? I mean, it's this sort of repetition without any kind of hope that things are going to be really different in the future. I was just looking this morning, and we've got a pretty significant ramping up of this new strain, and it's not being talked about a whole lot, but it's sort of in the back of my head, like that's still, we're not done. And so when will we be done? When is this going to be over? When will I not need to have space in my head that goes, are you unsafe? Am I unsafe? Are you unsafe? That is such a survival mechanism. So the way we define that is trauma. When you're living to survive, you're in a state of trauma. So how do we move forward is we acknowledge that, we find ways to acknowledge that we're not in this moment in a state of life or death. And that's so critical. So being present is so important. I I have just, kind of 3 or 4 things that I always keep in my head when I start feeling that fear. And mine's not always fear. I have some agitation that will show up instead of fear. So when I start feeling that kind of irritability, I know I need to breathe. I know I need to reach out and reach in. That means reach out to someone. And it doesn't mean reach out and say, I'm scared or I'm mad. It means reach out and ask them how they're doing. Just connect. And then I've got to reach in to reconnect with myself, to reconnect with my God, and reconnect spiritually, because that's where I find my safe harbor. That's where I find my steadiness of my feet. And then the last one is move, that I have to keep moving. And that was one of the gifts that I had of COVID. I was working at home. I walked so much more. I looked at my photos. I encourage you all to do that. Look through your phone photos for the last year and see what's different about them. I was really surprised. I found so many photos of nature on my walks. I'm taking pictures of flowers, of butterflies, of weird little bugs, of leaves changing, and I was so focused on the beauty that surrounded me. And I'm losing that again, right? Now I'm walking and I got this, am I done? How much longer do I have to go? Missing it. So I want to get back to that.
Snapping back to old habits.
Right.
I've got a 3-month sabbatical coming up, so I'm going to look through all 180 million pictures I have of nature. It may take longer than 3 months. At Unity, we try our best to live and demonstrate from our principles. And we certainly see things through the lens of our principles. And our first principle is that basically that God is everywhere present. God, the good, the omnipotent, is the power that is active in my life and in the universe. So that speaks to, therefore, even though we've gone through these challenges and this trauma, that somehow there's good. And we also, our third principle is that we co-create with God, is one way to put it. That I'm creating, but also I didn't make that tree out there grow, so that's Mother Nature, that's universe, it's God, so it's this incredible universe. So, but we're in effect, we're co-creating our reality from that perspective. So what can you speak to that we have gained out of this? There must be good happening.
One of the things that I would go back to something that we were talking about just a little bit earlier, I believe that the minimum of love is respect. And I think that if we can show up in a manner of respect, both to our environment, both to our fellow human being, the golden rule comes into play of how do we treat each other. That's the guiding principle that if we stick with that, I think it helps us show up. And while we don't grow the tree, certainly we can cut it down. Where we can save how we show up and pay attention to who we are and how we show up, I think we do have an influence over other people. I think that we can offer a better model of how to be a part of this creation and how we can begin to treat each other, making sure that we're at that level of respect. That, to me, is leads us from a personal level. That's how we step into this co-creation. But to recognize, as I was quoting Dr. Young before, to recognize that God is present and to be curious about what would God have me do here. I do not get direct voices from God saying, this is what you need to do, Gowan. It just doesn't happen for me. I wish it did. But what I can do is put myself around people that I trust, people who show up in authentic ways in their life, and through communication with them, we can develop a better plan of how Daniel gets to move forward. And when I make myself available to what I believe are spiritual principles and guidance, then more than less I move forward in a healthier way. And that's how I think we're all invited to co-create as we move forward.
Great. Did you have anything to add, or are you complete on that subject? Dr. Dina, you went into a few action steps and things that we may do to move forward, and I would really like for us during our Q&A today, our dialogue we're going to have at 12:30, to dive deeper into some action steps that maybe are even tailored to some of the questions that we get. So that will be great. I was reminded of a book that is called, it's actually called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. And I just thought that was a great title because maybe that someone is your neighbor. Maybe that someone is someone in your spiritual community, your family, one of our small groups that we have here. But she's saying that everybody should talk to someone, and she said that the author said that question she always gets is, does everyone need therapy? And I'll be curious to what you guys say about this question. But does everyone need therapy? And actually, she said she believes everyone can benefit from therapy. Not that everyone needs therapy, but everyone can benefit from therapy, and that everyone needs somebody in a safe space that they can trust, that they can talk to. Part of the requirement becoming ordained was to talk to outside professional, and I got to work with Reverend Daniel, and we did some great work together. But I speak to that because I believe our path in unity, we talk about the willingness to go from our head to our heart, not just be in our head, and to open our hearts and to be willing to be vulnerable. And for some of you, it may be jumping in our built-in pool we had last week. But for most of us, it's diving into the deep pool of growth, and that we're not perfect, and that we're all in this together, which is why I chose this picture today to go in the PowerPoint. But anything about that, and any closing comments you may have as we wrap up this portion of our day?
The joke in the industry is therapy is not for those who need it, it's for those who want it. And I think there is the element of what you're talking about, that we do need connection. The connection is vital to us. Therapy isn't the only way to do that. It is a great way. There's some specialty things that can happen there with specific trainings, but to have a small group at church, to have a small group here at Unity to participate in, to go to a Sunday school, to have a group of friends that you meet on a regular basis. I was at a restaurant the other day, and there was a group of ladies getting up to leave, and the manager of the restaurant was yelling, "See y'all next week." I think that's a great way to connect, and it's not just limited to therapy. But we do need that group of people that we have to connect with and to stay connected to.
So I think everyone could benefit from good therapy. So
good one.
That is
That'll be a quote from the day right there.
So what I mean by that is that be selective and ask some questions before you step into therapy, because it's so critical. Just as you all know, finding a place to call home in your spiritual community, you have to really look closely and pay attention to what's going on with you to make sure it's a good match. And I would just say the same for therapists too. There are some specific areas that I think are in need of a trained mental health professional. So yes, people will benefit from that in that situation. But I think what Daniel's saying and what James is saying is that we've got to stay connected. And one of my spiritual tenets, and this doesn't sound like a spiritual tenet, is that we don't grow alone. We don't grow alone. We don't grow and thrive and become the people we are capable of becoming alone. So make sure you've got a circle, and then expand that circle. And if that includes walking with a therapist for part of that journey, I think that's incredibly helpful. Walking with a wise spiritual guide is incredibly helpful. Picking a mentor in your field is also helpful. So having someone where you pause, you get still, you reflect, and they reflect to you what it is that they see in you is how we all grow. That's my belief.
I so enjoy hearing people talk about the connection. You spoke of connection that people receive just by being able to connect with us either through Zoom or here on Sundays. Coming every Sunday helps with that mental well-being, to connect with others and to be inspired and to pray together, to meditate together. I think it's so valuable. And that's one reason I wanted you guys to meet the 2 Ds in D2 counseling this week and last week at the picnic, is because I'll be going on sabbatical next month, and I want to make sure people know who they could go to for professional counseling and even spiritual counseling, because I do spiritual counseling, but I want to make sure that you have a good resource to be able to do that, along with the prayer help that our chaplains do such a beautiful job of. Would you like to have a prayer chaplain that you can connect with once a month or once a week or at whatever interval you need? Once an hour? So please take advantage of what we do here at Unity of Dallas. And during announcements, I want to let everybody know how to connect with you, because you also, through Zoom now, right, people are able to connect with you either way, through the internet or in person. So we'll talk about that a little bit during announcements. What we want to do is wrap this part of the day up, but at 12:30, we're going to get back together for about an hour so that you can ask any questions that are percolating. And those of you that are watching us online, you'll be able to send us questions as well, and we'll explain how you can do that. And we even have a little sustenance today for those of you that are wanting to stay, for those of you that are staying today, or those of you that are jumping in your car to get over here by 12:30. We do have some light refreshments. We have cheese and crackers and cheesecake and vegetable tray, and I think we're going to cover some food groups and water, but just enough to hold you over for our hour beginning at 12:30. And but before we do that, before we wrap up today, let's just do that together to be mindful. Our mindfulness practice includes generally meditation at Unity of Dallas, and if you're new to Unity, it's many forms of meditation, and we teach different forms. There's no wrong way to do it, but generally on Sundays, we just like to settle in together for just a few minutes, to be quiet, to just be here now, to be still, and I'll guide it, and then there will be a little bit of silence. And just to let this kind of ruminate, just let it resonate a little bit with you, and see if anything bubbles up for you. Okay, so I invite you to do it with me, and it's pretty simple. All we do is just sit here. And in your comfortable prayer position, typically feet on the floor, hands relaxed, shoulders relaxed. And as Bob plays a little bit of underneath me, I'm just going to ask you to just, if you're comfortable, close your eyes. You don't have to, but just take a deep breath. We set our intention to the knowing that God is here, all around us, within us. Spirit is moving. So in faith, we just continue to breathe deeper this gift of breath, this life-affirming gift of breath. And just breathe a little deeper, allowing your seat to support you. And I just start today with gratitude. Allow gratitude, a feeling of gratefulness, to enter into your consciousness. Gratefulness for those in the industry, like our 2 guests today, that are helping individuals and groups move forward. To move forward in a way that opens them up and opens each of us up to live our best life. We can breathe in that gratitude for the ability to live in our highest and best. We're so grateful to this amazing universe, to the source of all life, that in each intelligent cell of our body, divine mind is the architect, that our natural state is wholeness, mentally, physically, spiritually. So just by showing up today to be with us is saying yes, yes to life, yes to God. And admitting, yes, that we as human beings in our own humanness, our own egos, we face these challenges that appear. But we also get to admit those challenges, to be vulnerable, but to collectively show up with each other, with each breath, in this now moment, to say, I am willing. I am willing to live from my wholeness. I am willing to look at behaviors in my life where I am not showing up whole, even if it admits self-sabotaging behavior. If we have to admit to that, that's okay. Because the truth is, we are whole because God is present. So when we step off the path, we get to step back onto the spiritual path in this now moment and accept the Christ nature. To accept what Jesus of Nazareth was trying to tell us, to love, that God is love, to love each other. So with another deep breath, we take that truth into the holy and sacred silence. Continue to take a deep breath. We may feel the light on our faces. We may feel a smile coming across our face of enthusiasm to do the work that is ours to do, to live a balanced life. And with another deep breath, say, thank you, God. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amen and amen.
And in holding this time of reverence, usually I get up here and make a joke, but can't happen today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to finally learn why you call your business D2. You know, I've always wondered, we making the announcement, D2's coming, D2's going to be, thank you. So lovely. And this is a time when we look at our prosperity consciousness and
can we just give these guys a big round of applause?
I was going to do that. Yes. Yeah. Can't wait. Can't wait. I may do that again after the announcement.
We'll do it again.
Yeah, there you go. So for those of you at home, you know that there are many ways that you can make your donations through the website, text and give, the United States Post Office, and when we walk out of here today, we have the donation station, that box, and so we ask you to bless your offerings to your benefit and to the benefit of the church and to all the people that we help through Unity of Dallas. So let's say together our offertory blessing. Divine love as me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, Spirit.